this is me the last one I'm talking about this being on jury duty, and I want to talk about the case. And as I do so, I'm going to have to think carefully because of what do I want to say and what don't I want to say. Between it's public record, I am not going to use the individuals' names. I don't believe, even though you could look that up. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to figure out what this case is. I'm going to give enough details about the case. You could look up the people if you wanted, and yeah, everything I'm going to say is true. So I'm not worried in the sense of any of that. There's just going to be a few things that I think I want to say that may not be entirely flattering to everybody, but it is what it is. We'll see where this goes down the road. But so the case was from last August. It revolved around two people who had been in a relationship, a romantic relationship, which played in. We had to actually decide, were they. There was a specific definition, and please don't hold me to any specific words, because there were lots of very specific words in there. But basically, we had to decide, were they a household? Did they live together? And the definition meant, were they a domestic, because this was a domestic dispute, were they a domestic, even though they were broken up at the time that this happened. And the definition says, yes, if they had been in a romantic relationship previously. And Washington, it was interesting, it came up, Washington has some very specific things that happen. We actually brought it up in the jury room to say, you should be careful about who you live with. Especially if you date somebody and then choose to live with them. I don't care if it's for a week, because it's not specified there. It changes the laws that have to deal with you quite drastically. You are now in a domestic situation where if you have a disagreement, if you have a fight, all of the laws change based upon that. And there are enhancements on all of the things. So getting into a physical altercation with somebody is bad, and the law looks poorly on that. Getting into a physical altercation with somebody who meets the definition of living together in a romantic relationship, way worse, because it enhances all sorts of things. Because to stop domestic abuse and so forth, they've ramped up the laws in those things. And so a piece of that is we had to define, yes, were they or weren't they? Were they romantically related? Had they lived together? We had to decide those things, and all but one of the charges made us separately say whether or not those things had happened. And it's because I believe there's enhancements that go with that. That's why. So each charge we had to reaffirm, yes, we believe that they were in a romantic relationship with each other. They had broken up. It had obviously been ugly. There were multiple things I noticed as went through that indicated those sorts of things. One of the interesting ones is, I had mentioned before, we heard the 911 call. We heard her portion of a 911 call, and it was interesting in the call. It was obvious to me that the 911 operator knew who she was, knew who he was, knew who the guy who the altercation happened at Safeway in Cle Elum, in the parking lot at the Safeway in Cle Elum. She had gotten there in her truck, but with a friend of hers driving. The friend who had gone into Safeway, the 911 operator knew who he was. There'd been enough history here that they know who all these people, the guy who shows up to beat her up, the ex who shows up to beat her up, they knew who he was.
In his vehicle.
And his vehicle. They knew what vehicle to send the cops looking for. All these things are happening now. We didn't hear the whole 911 tape, so could there be other things that were... Yeah, I believe that. But some of it, I've heard enough of this stuff to just know this is what it sounds like when they're going, okay, what did he do this time? That was the whole tenor of the whole thing. And they mentioned, we got them out looking for his truck. His truck, where did this get mentioned? We heard a witness testify about the incident, and she could not positively identify the truck. So there's no way they got enough information from her, who also talked to 911 previously and we didn't hear that portion, but there's no way they told her enough about the truck for them to, from her, know how to find the truck. They knew the truck already. That was interesting to me. So it says this had some history to it. So she wanted to go, her friend wanted to go to the store. She agreed to let the friend take her truck to the store. But she would go with him. He drove to the store. She was in the passenger seat. He got out and went into the store. She was on the phone in her truck, and the ex shows up, parks behind the truck in a way to block the truck in, comes to the driver's side of the truck and pulls the driver's side of the truck open and physically attacks her in the passenger seat, strikes her multiple times. One of the things that obviously stood out to all of us, here's a thing, maybe a lesson to all of us. During the whole incident, he repeatedly called her a fucking bitch. It's amazing how that was definitely impactful to all of us. It sets the tone. You don't need to know when somebody is engaging. Maybe I don't know if this specifies, but when a male is engaging a disagreement with a female and his opening line is "fucking bitch," you don't need much more explanation of the kind of interaction it is.
Forgot about the paperwork that was signed, the restraining order.
Yes. So previous to this whole thing, thank you, previous to this whole thing that was important to the whole thing was that she had taken out a restraining order. They referred to it as a order of protection, a no contact order. I never picked it up and read it. It didn't have anything that I wanted to see. Most of the other jurors looked at it at some point. I was the foreman on the jury, so I had other things to do as they were looking at lots of stuff. But that didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was there was an order of protection, and the ex knew it because he had signed it. He never objected to that or anything, so it was clear that it was his actual signature on it, because that was one of the first things he was accused of, was breaking the no protection order. Showed up, opens the door, physically attacks her. In the process of that, she drops her phone as she cowers, covers. He's beating on her. One of the things she said is when he pulled up, she sees him pull up, but the truck is old enough, it doesn't have electric locks. She can't get to the driver's side door to lock it before he gets there and lets himself in and starts beating on her. She eventually gets the passenger door open and kind of just rolls out of the truck onto the ground. And key to this was the car in the next space was occupied by a person who we meet and testifies, and overhears part of what's going on and sees what's going on. And then, as she says, he then takes her phone. Her friend's phone was charging in the truck. Takes the phone. He takes both of those phones. Says something to the effect of, you don't need these, or you're not going to need these, or I'm taking these. This was the thing I mentioned in the previous episode where I said there was disagreement about what was said. She said two different things. She told us one, she said he said this, and another time she said she used different words, which I had written down each time, which was noted, and then takes the phones and he leaves. And the woman in the car right there responds, can't get enough information from her to talk to 911, but she calls 911, eventually hands the phone over to her. She talks to 911, and a 911 call that we hear, which was pretty dramatic. She's very, very upset. You can hear it. And we believed her. She either was very upset or she is a better actress than I've probably ever met. And I've been in acting for a long time, and so it was clear she was very upset. And so then that leads to this set of charges, and there were 5 charges. The first charge was that he broke the no contact order. It was very specifically worded. The charge doesn't have a magic name, but that he broke the no contact order by violently attacking her. It was a combo of the assault was in there. So it was not only that there was a no contact order, he broke it and assaulted her in doing so. That was the assault charge that was there. Then there was my brain is trying to...
911.
Yes. Then there was that he prevented her from calling 911, which he did by taking the phones. Then there were 2 theft charges that had to do with the phones. A theft charge of an item worth more than $750. That was her phone, which she said was a iPhone 11, and her friend's phone, which was a Motorola phone that he said was worth a couple $100. So that was a charge for a third-degree charge. This was a second-degree theft charge. This was a third-degree charge for an item worth less than $750. And then the last one was a robbery charge. And so as we went through them, the first charge was fairly clear. It was interesting. So one of the things that would be a future thing for me to talk to is about making a good argument, and how, honestly, I was disappointed in the performance of the prosecuting attorney. She did not do a great job of some of the basics of making a good argument. She did some things really well, getting us emotionally involved in what was in her point of view. Some things like that. Showing us things, visual aids as she used them, even though part of their system wasn't working, she still did a good job of some of those things. But one of the pieces she missed was the need to very precisely connect A to B to C to D, these sorts of things. So in that first charge, did a good job of, was there a protection order in place? Was it in place at the time? Did the other guy know it? Yes, that was presented well. There was testified, that's his signature. I recognize his signature because I did his taxes, these sorts of things. That's his signature. He didn't object. Okay, we believe it's a protection order. Okay, so that piece is good. Did he assault her? Well, it's interesting because there was never any great evidence presented that it was him. There was the assumption it was him. And we got there, but it could have been done so easily. It just is shocking to me that it didn't. For one, there was this ongoing discussion of a icy / milkshake / something cup of frozen something, which gets spilled all over her car, her truck, and in her hair and on her clothes, which we see in the photographs. The interesting thing is I expected when I first saw all of that, for that to be the opportunity to prove to us it was him. Because it was introduced that Safeway in Cle Elum did not have cameras on their parking lot. My question was there a receipt or something for him buying that at said location in Cle Elum? Look, here he is in the drive-thru of Burger King or whatever, which is right across the parking lot. Actually, that's what I expected them to say. And then they'd go, oh, minutes later, he's throwing this in her face. Now we've proven it's him. No, it was largely by his defense attorney never seriously suggesting it wasn't him, which was interesting to me. Refute the idea that it's even him was never presented. And that to me was interesting. There were lots of people involved. I think it could have been done in lots of ways. The police have known him. They've had history. But I expected somebody to connect that dot. Go, prove to me this is the guy whose truck we had lots of testimony about the truck. We had lots of things where there was she said it was him, and we got he did it. And we got the other witness said that it appears to be him, but his hair's different. Okay, just give me physical evidence. It's the dude. Give me something. To me, there were a bunch of phones there. Hey, how about locate the damn phones? There are ways. I just expected something that connected that dot better. Then did he assault her? Which, okay, we got that pretty well. We bought that, and so we put that together and we found him guilty on that charge. He assaulted her. Okay, but it was just that it was an entry to us going. It was kind of the first incident of me going, okay, she's not going to paint the whole picture for us in ways that were more problematic later. And I would say the fifth one, we don't convict on the fifth one. And a piece of it is she didn't do diddly squat to help us do it. And I mean help us in the sense that, okay, she convinced us he's a dick who just beat her up. And we want to convict this asshole. But there are dots you gotta connect, and none of them were connected, so we couldn't do it. We couldn't, in good conscience, do it. So the second one was the 911 call. And this is where it really goes. Is okay, prevents her from making a 911 call. Well, as I said, he beats her up. She drops her phone. She bails out of the truck. He grabs the phone and leaves. Much discussion about whether or not that prevented her from calling 911. It didn't prevent her from calling 911. The lady in the next car over called 911. What's the definition of prevented this person from calling 911? We were very clear, we even discussed, if this had been at a house 30 years ago and he had yanked the landline out of the wall and left with a phone, that would have prevented her from calling 911. And I think when this law was written, that's what they had in mind. Taking a phone in a parking lot at noon, in the middle of the day, noons may not be accurate, in the middle of the day on a Monday in Cle Elum at a Safeway parking lot, was that effective way of stopping her from calling 911? Well, maybe for about 10 seconds. Is that enough? Well, it said, and this was where there were two problems. One was the law and the way it's written, and we got jury instructions. We get a set of instructions that say, there's the definitions, and to convict on this, you have to have this and this and this and this. No, there were no good definitions on that. There was no, this is the definition of preventing. Preventing for how long? In what way prevent? There are no definitions in this. And we actually wrote out a question to the judge, which we didn't end up sending because I'd said, I don't think we're going to get anything back. I think if we send this, the judge is going to go, read your instructions again, which I asked the judge later. I read her the question I had written, and she said, yeah, I would have told you to just read your instructions again. And she agreed, no, there's no, neither the legal system, which is a couple of ways, either the people writing the laws or the legal establishment has not established a standard definition for those things, and so it was very, very weak. But a piece of it is it said prevented from or attempted to prevent. Well, it did actually prevent her from calling 911 on her own phone instantaneously, so it seemed to meet the definition to us, so we convicted him of it. It just was one where I think the prosecuting attorney making an argument could have done a better job of filling that in for us and saying, he did this. Here's what you're going to be asked to look at. She has access to the what we're going to be told. This is why this is this. Learn how to make a good argument. I just wasn't very impressed with that. And I'm intending to go and have a conversation with her and say, wow, this could have been a lot easier if you know what these are going to say. Why is your argument not built around that? About what are we going to talk about when we get in the back room by ourselves? So then it was the two theft charges. Again, these ones were really interesting because we had a long discussion about, was there even proof there were phones there? This is one of these ones where we were within what we were supposed to do. I feel confident, but gosh, did they hang us on the line out there. Hey, prosecuting attorney, how about a receipt for a phone? How about a phone bill that proves she had a phone? How about a phone bill from her that showed her data usage stopping at Safeway or on the day and time, and that phone was never used again? Like, my God, there were so many opportunities to make this easy, and instead we had to go off of her word she had a phone. And it was interesting what this came down to, because we had big discussions about, was there enough evidence given for us for beyond reasonable doubt for us to believe there were two phones in those trucks, because there were two charges. Were there two phones in that truck, and did he take them both? And they could have been made way, way, way easier. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell in a second, one way it was made way worse. But obviously they were key. There were charges based upon them. So the phone, the iPhone. Number one, was there two phones? Okay. We believed her. We'd already decided we believed her. That's why we're doing what we're doing. She was the key witness. We believed her. We believe things like on 911, when she's in the panic moment, she said, I was sitting in my truck on my phone. And okay, it's those sorts of things. We realized we were looking at two things. Either she had a phone and he took it, or after just having the shit kicked out of her, in the seconds after that, she invented a story about having a phone and having it stolen to hang him up for a phone somehow. And we didn't believe she could make up that good a story that fast, especially because of the details that were in there. But we're left to just believe her. Are there phones? Okay? It was an interesting thing. Turned out we had one other bit of evidence. Technically, it was presented to us because they gave us photographs of the truck. And out of that, we found a piece of evidence that wasn't presented to us, but I feel solid that since they handed us the picture, we were okay to use the picture. And one of the women on the jury noticed that there were clearly two cell phone chargers plugged in the truck. One of them was an iPhone charger, and one of them was a cheap phone charger. Evidence that there were two phones there. That mattered a lot, so why the hell were we finding them? That just bothers me. It bothers me that somebody who had months to look at this case left us to find evidence in a photograph that got handed to us, and that it ended up having to matter. I'm not sure we needed that bit of evidence, but it made us feel a lot better with how we were feeling about everything when we realized there was another piece of evidence that very strongly suggested that there were two phones. One was an iPhone and one wasn't. We're blessed with simple shit like Apple uses white cords on stuff. Simple things that suggested iPhone versus not iPhone. It's not that we don't change out the cords, but she had argued she had the iPhone for less than a month. How long do our iPhone cords last? But in that first month, most of us have a white iPhone cord. It was that sort of thing. That was just an interesting thing. The other one was standard rules. I've asked people who've been my students today since then, is what's my rule number one about asking questions? Rule number one about asking a question is in a debate, a court case is a debate. It's the ultimate of debates. Don't ask questions you don't know the answer to. And the prosecuting attorney asked the woman who was in the car next, when she testified, if she saw anything in the truck. It was clearly she was trying to elicit that there was no phones. Asked her about the phones, and the woman recalled seeing the phone in the truck. She never looked in the truck until after the guy was gone. Now what do we do with it? The interesting thing is that was the longest discussion we had, and largely it centered around the fact that witnesses remember shit. And we think basically the prosecuting attorney talked her into remembering something that wasn't there because of the way she asked the question. And every one of us were blown away because it was obvious the prosecuting attorney got an answer she didn't expect, which says she asked a question she didn't know the answer to. And now we have conflicting memories going on, and luckily there was enough intelligence in the room to talk about how obviously both memories aren't clear. They're both not right. And so the question is things like, could you remember something that looked like a phone and remember it as a phone? Especially when even at the scene, there's lots of discussions of phones going on. It's also months later, and it was really clear that this woman hadn't been asked about phones in all of that time. Wow, she could have blown that section up right there, and very, very, very nearly did. If we didn't believe as much as we did, and we didn't, that's where if we hadn't seen two phone chargers there, that might have made all of the difference because of the fact that it could go either way, trying to decide, do we have a reasonable doubt that those phones were there? And no, we decided that thinking that that nobody there had a phone was unreasonable, and thinking she invented the whole story in the time and in the way, we decided that was unreasonable. But boy, did she come close to blowing it up by asking a question she clearly didn't know the answer to, which was amazing to see such. To me, my gosh, that's got to be, trial day 101 shit. Don't ask a question of your own witness. Don't ask questions you don't know the answer to. To me, that just seemed like a rookie mistake. And I know I'm not making the prosecutor look good. She did win 4 out of 5 on this, and she got there. And we liked her, and she did a lot of good stuff. But we were just not very impressed with that as a whole group. And that was the first thing we talked about when we walked in the room, was what the hell was the question she didn't know the answer to? Why ask that question? That was the first thing when we were allowed to finally talk to each other. That was the first thing the group went, why did she ask that question? Did she really not know what she was going to say? Then why'd she ask? Amazing. It was so surprising that I would like to listen back to that section of the trial, because we were so shocked by the answer that all of us wished we'd written down the exact wording of the question. What did she just actually ask her? How did she? Because none of us can remember exactly how that question was asked, because it was such an obvious question and we were waiting for the answer. No, I didn't see any phones or anything like that. We were just, and instead that was the first thing that went, what? Wait, hold on a second here. Did she just disagree? Did you just ask? She used 3 witnesses. There wasn't, no, 4, sorry. 4 witnesses. We now have the most important witness, and the next witnesses disagree. We're like, ooh, uh-oh. So that was interesting. So in that, then we had to decide. The other interesting one is we had no information about the phone. So we decided, yes, there were phones, and yes, they got taken. Okay? What got taken? She says an iPhone 11. She'd mentioned one other thing. She'd said my phone was teal and his phone was black. And I thought I saw in his hand, she had hedged. She said, I can't say he took the other guy's phone. He had something black and his phone was black and my phone was teal. And I believe he had my teal phone and black phone, something. And so we had that. And it was interesting. We were going back and forth on, could it be, if you were asked what phone would you take, you say, oh, it was an iPhone 11. It was the latest thing. Is that what's going on here? And it matters to the charge. Are you trying to say it's a phone over $750? We're going back and forth. And the interesting thing was, maybe the oldest or second oldest guy in the room, retired guy, says, well, a month before the incident, the iPhone 11 had come out, and they came out with 2 of them, the iPhone 11 and the iPhone Pro. And the iPhone 11 was teal, and the iPhone Pro is light blue. And we were all flabbergasted. We're like, that is wildly helpful information. I mean, that is like, could we invite in the Apple guy to explain to us the history of iPhones? How is it you know that? Everybody was like, we were all relieved because we had the information. It was amazing. The whole room was like, thank you, but why do you know? And he said, and he clarified, he said, I, about the time of the incident, bought an iPhone 11, and I bought an 11 Pro, and I bought an 11 Pro because it had a better camera and it wasn't teal. And so it was just amazing. And it was amazing we hadn't been told this. Why weren't we told iPhone 11s are teal? She mentioned to you multiple times it was teal. I'm telling you, here's an iPhone chart from August of last year. God, why is luck of knowledge in the room playing a part in how this is done? That's disappointing to me. I'm like, and I'm going to ask the prosecutor, why leave these holes? Why did you not help us through this? This was the A to B to C to D that leads to conviction, that we could have convicted this stuff in 5 minutes had we been given a better presentation of information that was clearly available, like the iPhone 11 only came in one color and it was teal. God, that would have been because now the amount of information that she would have had to invent in seconds to come up with enough information to have faked the story meant no one would have bought that. It would have been an easy decision if we'd just been handed all the knowledge that was generally available, like a receipt for a phone or a box for a phone, or, I mean, she'd only had it for a month. Do you still have your iPhone box sitting around? I still have my iPhone box sitting around. I've had the phone a long time. That's because I'm bad at throwing, because an iPhone, you know, if it breaks in the first little while, you're going to have to send it back, and you got to send it back in the damn box and all that. So you keep that stuff around for a while. A month into this, she still had the phone. She still had the box. Get the damn box. Oh, by the way, because those boxes are very, very unique, that box is basically a receipt because they're specific to the phone. It's got the phone's info on it. So, wow, would this have been easier if one of the pieces of evidence had been an iPhone box? I just wonder where things like that were missing from the whole thing. So, yes, we convicted on both of those. Then the last one was very interesting because the last one was a robbery charge. A violent robbery charge, and again, if I had the exact terminology, but it was committed, a assault in behalf of a robbery. Okay, and the word and the wording of it, we were immediately going. The wording of it to all of us suggested a person commits a robbery and in the process of a robbery assaults somebody. And we went, this was the opposite of that. This was an assault at the end of somebody committed a robbery. Does that matter? Well, we got into the wording of what was handed to us, and it was very clear that mattered. That in the process of taking an item of value, of preventing somebody access to their property. And let's go back to what this is all about, the whole liberty thing this is all about. That one of the founding concepts of our country is that without a jury trial, you cannot have your property, life, liberty, property. You cannot have your property taken from you without proper cause. If someone takes your property against your will, it's a robbery. In this case, if to commit the robbery, if to take your property from you, they assaulted you, that was the situation. And we went, that's not what happened here at all. And by this time, we've talked about this asshole enough. We really don't like him a lot. And we would really much like to have just said guilty on everything. And it really makes me wonder how often that happens. How many times by the time you get to count number 5, you just go, yep, guilty. Because mobs do weird things. Mobs do crazy shit. Right now, we see a lot of that in this country. Mobs decide something happens I don't like, I can steal the shit from the Target store. How do groups decide that? I don't know. But could you get 12 people to go, yep, string this guy up on everything that we could? Yeah, I think that could happen really easily. In this case, we had a group of people who were more committed to what we were told than that. And so we couldn't. And we wanted to. Which says how much, whether or not the prosecutor could have convinced us, because we suspected one of two things. This is where I'm getting beyond my legal knowledge, but one of the things I read about a lot, and one of the things that I think is a rampant problem, is overcharging. The idea, it says, what's the worst thing I can charge people with? I want to, and it's because prosecutors are human beings, just like everybody else, and their worlds exist on things like getting convictions for significant things. One of the ones we're seeing a lot of right now goes back to the January 6th and the takeover of the Capitol building. And it over and over and over and over again, you're hearing the word insurrection. They committed insurrection. It was insurrection, insurrection, insurrection. You heard Congress people saying it. You heard lots of media people saying all of that. And I have continuously pointed out to people, no one has been charged with insurrection. No one. And I'm predicting no one will be charged with insurrection. If they are, though, it will be because prosecutors have used the word so many times that they feel they will have failed if they don't convict somebody of insurrection because they called it insurrection. And so they're going to pick a candidate to decide they were the ringleader of insurrection. And what is likely to happen is they'll be found not guilty. Because insurrection, the word insurrection means something, and no matter how much I don't like what happened on January 6th and how much all of those people should be prosecuted for what they did was not insurrection. Insurrection means something. They did not take over the government. They did not supplant the government. They barely hindered the government in its activities, which is one of the things in there, but they didn't even manage to keep the vote that was happening that day from happening that day. There was no plan to it. There was no organization. There was a mob of people who attacked something. And the difference between what happened at the Capitol building and what happens at a Target store or a store or people bashing in the windows of the Starbucks in Portland again yesterday, they're not really any different. They're not much. As a matter of fact, I think the Portland stuff is way more organized than what happened on that day. Even if there were a few people who tried to be an organizer behind it, they failed miserably. And I've yet to even see any proof of that. I think the largest percentage of the people who were in the building doing stuff were mob mentality, and they got geared up and they went with a crowd and they followed, and pretty soon they're inside the building taking selfies where they shouldn't be. And they were trespassing and shit like that. And that's what they'll get convicted of. But it's amazing how often prosecutors, especially federal ones, go after high charges and lose. Watch the Frontline television show, PBS Frontline, about the Bundy battle with the Bundys and taking their cattle, and all the way up through them taking the wildlife refuge and all of that. And basically all of the big federal charges there, they lost on all of that. And it's because words mean things, and they kept prosecuting things they couldn't prove. They kept shooting for the mountaintops and failing. And that's how this charge felt. This charge felt like, what's the worst thing we can put on this person? And then not enough work was done to connect the dots in any way. I'm left not even knowing if that charge could be made to stick. There was just not enough there to explain how the jury instructions we got that said these elements have to be there, that use words like, explain to me how phones being taken after they beat her up and she was out of the truck, because it had to be in the activity of doing. So like if she had jumped up and tried to get her phone back and he punched her so she couldn't get it, now it's robbery. Now it meets the definition. But the words were very specific, and we weren't told how the actions that were described to us could meet those very specific words, because they lined up like this. And went, okay, but they weren't like this, they were like this. So how do we... They bump in together like this. They don't mirror each other. They weren't... They needed to be this way, and they were like this. And we went, okay, they're similar. Both involved an assault, and both involved stuff being taken. But the one we're charging says that you had to be assaulting to take the stuff. And that's not what happened. He didn't show up to steal some phones. He showed up to assault her, and he took some phones. And I think when you're convicting an American of something and you're going to take away their liberties, the semantics are everything in it. And so if you're going to convince us, it would have taken actual work to convince us. I'm not sure we even could have been convinced, because it was amazing as a group. I thought we'd spend more time on this one, but as a group, we all went, not even close. Every one of us, the reaction was, how does this even line up? This makes no sense. And so, why even charge? one of two questions. Why charge it, which seems not to have fit altogether? If there is a way it fit, why not explain to us how it fits? Because I can't imagine, I really can't imagine a jury looking at what we looked at and convicting of that. I don't know how. What was most upsetting was when they read through each of the verdicts. He was obviously upset from the first guilty verdict. Second guilty verdict, he was standing there. God, he and his lawyer were happy at the not guilty for the last one, which made us all, we immediately had a conversation afterwards, and we think that probably carried the heaviest penalties. His reaction was very disappointing. We didn't want to see that. We didn't want to see him happy about anything. He is a pathetic, horrendous human being who should have his freedoms taken away because he's a horrible person. Yeah, we convicted him. And he's a pathetic piece of shit. And I'll be on record having said so. And should have been convicted. And it was disappointing. That's why I'm disappointed in that charge and the whole thing, because at the end of all of this, to see him smile disappointed me. Because it makes me suspect he's not going to be punished bad enough. It was, yeah, like I say, it was, no, he's just, everything that we saw about him from his behavior in the court, everything about him says he's a piece of trash. But we worked really hard we very consciously looked at every single individual charge as though he was innocent, unless there was enough to prove he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, which might be an interesting discussion sometime. There was some definitions of reasonable doubt. What is reasonable doubt, which I found interesting. But no, watching him all the way through, and it's funny because they talk about things like, if you're guilty, you hear this, if it's guilty, the jury won't look at you. I looked at him much of the whole time. I was interested. It was unfortunate he wore a mask the whole time. We had to have masks, but even his eyes, there was a lot of, and he did he did this stuff. You know, his body language said, "I'm an asshole," which is interesting because we're allowed to take that into account. We're allowed to watch him. There's a reason why you face your accuser, and he didn't do himself any favors in that. He didn't do himself. It's funny, I'm not a dress-up person. He didn't do himself any favor by not wearing a tie to court. That seems like such a simple thing, but to me, he didn't put himself together. It was like he put himself together the most minimal that mattered, that he thought he could get away with. And he was cocky. And he was, rather than a guy mad he was being accused of something he didn't do. He wasn't indignant. He wasn't, he was, and they put up no defense. They put up no defense at all. And it was interesting because he could have, I think his lawyer could have whacked down several of the charges. I think that they could have been, I mean, the phone thing was close enough that I think that they get to put their case on after the prosecution does. I think could have whacked it down. I mean, this is not a 2-week trial. This is day. It said, I see there were no phones there. No matter what they say, there were no phones. I think that would have gone a long ways. I think because we would have had something to put against, make an argument that he didn't take any phones, didn't make an argument at all. We can't hold against him he didn't make an argument. What it meant was the argument that there were phones and all those things stood unchecked. There was no refuting of them in any way whatsoever, and I think the evidence for them was was compelling mostly because it was unrefuted. It was left with nothing else against it. And so I think I don't know what, there was a sense, there were definitely some things in the trial that made us think that at one time there was a plan for a defense that never happened, that for whatever reason they made the decision. It was clear that what they did was they made the decision that we would not find guilty because the prosecuting attorney didn't give us enough evidence to convict. He was wrong in that. And so I think that was a bad choice. It was left possible because the prosecuting attorney didn't do that great of job. That was an opening that was left there, and it was a better gamble than it would have been had she done a better job. But she also left an opening that could have erased several of these things by making it a definite he said, she said sort of, or something that erased some of the things that had been put in her pile, or in the state's pile in this case. So there was some real interesting possibilities there of going, okay, and I would want my lawyer to be, I would want my lawyer to have seen those opportunities, I think. And the other part we don't know, in all fairness, I've got to say, the other thing we don't know is what was planned to be said or whatever that went on when we weren't there, and what did he plan to do or whatever that was told he couldn't say for whatever reason. Because there's all this other legal stuff that goes on about what can be presented and what can't and all those sorts of things, and that's not our purview. I only know from our part was we heard somebody give very good evidence, which is what testimony is, that certain things happened, and because there was nothing to suggest another reason for things or another explanation or anything else, we were left to only decide, was that enough evidence for us to believe it? And we decided yes on 4 out of 5 things. So either way, still fascinating, interesting experience. It leaves me with only a couple things going forward. One, I would be interested in being in a jury again. The experience was not negative. I wouldn't want to do it tomorrow. I find it emotionally draining. It's important. You don't want to do life-altering things every single day. And I do, because of who I am, want to have a conversation with the prosecuting attorney. I intend to go see her because she's my prosecuting attorney. I am a member of this county and I pay her bills, and I want to find out if she's open. The judge was surprised and the bailiff was surprised they didn't come in to talk to us afterwards. There's one of the other things I didn't know about juries, is right afterwards you go back to the jury room and the attorneys for both sides can come talk to you, and you don't have to stay, you don't have to talk to them, but you can stay, and that it was made very clear that normally happens. They come back to talk to you and will answer questions for you or ask you questions. What question? They didn't show up. Neither of them showed up. That was surprising to the judge. It was surprising to the bailiff, and it was surprising to us that neither of them cared what we thought or why we decided or anything. And it's their last actual time to talk to us. The judge did show up to talk to us, and that was really interesting. I was impressed by her. I think our county has 2 very good judges. And what I saw, I've watched Judge Sparks, who was supposed to preside on this case. I've watched Judge Sparks multiple times, and I'm very impressed with him. She was very impressive, too. I liked her. I think she handled things very well, very reasonably. I would not fear at all to be in front of her as somebody who wants something tried fairly. So that was good. But I would want the prosecuting attorney, to me, represents us. And if I was the victim in this case, I would be unhappy with the quality of the presentation. And I think in some ways, I think she got a better verdict than she deserved. And I think it could have very easily gone the other way. And I'd like to know if she's interested in hearing what my experience of it was from the other side, and whether or not she's willing to hear me say, you could connect the dots way better. I would not, if you were in my class and this was the debate speech, you wouldn't get a great grade on it because you just left holes you could drive a truck through, and you got really lucky the other side didn't decide to hand you your head, because I think they could have. I think I could have walked to the defendant's table and done a better job and taken down what she'd just done in real time, not knowing the stuff ahead of time. It's like she didn't use basic 101 things you need to do to make a good argument of connect the dots, help your mind answer the set of questions we were going to get. It very much seemed in many cases the most important questions we were going to have to answer she didn't address at all. Did not help us get there. And that to me is disappointing. I would expect better out of her. And hope that there's a chance. As a matter of fact, I think I feel strongly enough about it that if she's unresponsive to my chance of sharing what I feel, she can listen to it or not. But if she's not at least willing to hear what I have to say, then I'll probably go to her boss. because I know he can get the transcript and can actually listen to it, and I'll explain all this to him instead and say, she's got to be better than this. She seemed smart. She seemed engaging and all those things. I'm hoping she just had an off couple of days, that she's capable of better, because I think she definitely has skills sitting there and so forth. I think she has some basic stuff, but I think she needs practice. I don't know how many cases she's tried like this, but it just showed some lack of things that I would have expected out of freshmen at Central. They just go, wow, I'd have beat my students up for this, let alone somebody who's got a law degree and supposedly is the professional doing this. So I'm not saying she did anything wrong. What I'm saying is she could have lost this outright. She's very close on that edge, and she could have done dramatically better. And I'm willing to be part of the solution, but whether or not she'll listen to me and as a representative of the jury or not, I don't know.